This fucking sucks. On the outskirts of a desolate, fog-shrouded town, a man by the name of James Sunderland contemplates as he receives a letter from his wife, who died 3 years ago. In it, she asks him to meet her in their special place, in Silent Hill. Drawn in by grief, James ventures into the decaying town, where not only does he come across monstrous manifestations of his repressed psyche, but others who have also been summoned there for their own equally unsettling reasons. Released in 2001, Silent Hill 2 redefines psychological horror in gaming, celebrated for its suffocating atmosphere, symbolic monster design, and emotionally devastating narrative. It remains widely regarded as one of the greatest horror games ever created, a true landmark title that transformed the genre forever. And then 25 years later, they made this piece of shit. Hi, my name's Kerbins, I really love horror, and I'm also a really big fan of Silent Hill. Let's just say I'm really frustrated by this movie. I mean, I already knew that ever since it was announced that Return to Silent Hill was going to be bad, but just because I was right doesn't mean I necessarily feel good. The point of an adaptation is to reintroduce the material under a different medium, not only so that you can appeal to a wider audience, but so that people who are fans of the original can experience the thing that they like in a new way, you know? Now, a lot of people say that they like the first Silent Hill movie, because even though it's only loosely based on the first game and takes some liberties with the source material, fans have come to accept it as its own thing. At the time the first movie came out, video game movies were just not that common, and if there was one, there was a good chance that it was just straight up garbage. And then, of course, they made Silent Hill Revelations, which I honestly haven't seen since it was in theaters, but let me tell you...
We are one.
Yeah, it was bad. But anyways, I think our standards for video game adaptations have gotten a lot higher in recent years. Super Mario Bros., Sonic, Detective Pikachu, and not even listing kids games, we also had the Fallout TV show and Iron Lung, all of which were really good. Obviously, there have been a lot of stinkers in recent years too, but the main point I'm trying to make is that it can be done. I firmly believe that you can adapt anything into whatever you want as long as you know what you're doing. So that doesn't mean that we should have to lower our standards just because it's a, quote, video game movie. And if it's not obvious already, I'm an OG Silent Hill 2 glazer. It's legitimately my favorite out of the series. I even made a Silent Hill 2 parody animation a couple years ago, but you know, with Seinfeld characters. So I'm very much aware that I'm coming into this with a lot of bias, but Silent Hill 2 is just really important to me. I'm aware that I probably sound like one of those 2010-esque angry reviewer type YouTubers, but you know what? With how low of a review score this has, yeah, I don't really care. It really is that bad. Let's just watch this stupid thing because, yeah, I want to talk about it. Little bit of a disclosure here. When I'm talking about the Silent Hill 2 game, I'm talking about the original, as I haven't played the remake yet, but from what I understand, the core story elements and themes in the remake match pretty closely to the original, so please keep that in mind. So I think that in order to talk about why the movie fundamentally doesn't work, I think I need to give a bit of context as to what the town of Silent Hill actually is. Before the town was established, the surrounding area already possessed a mysterious spiritual power. The indigenous people who lived there existed in harmony with this force. However, over many years, a series of tragedies and the eventual formation of a small colony that became Silent Hill caused this power to become twisted and corrupted. A demon-worshipping cult known as the Order eventually formed, devoted to harnessing and worshipping the town's power. One of the cult's leaders, Dahlia, had a daughter named Alyssa, who was born with extraordinary psychic abilities. Dahlia planned to use Alyssa in a ritual to impregnate her so that she can give birth to the cult's god. It's kept vague, but something went wrong during the ritual. Alyssa's psychic powers reacted violently, causing a massive fire that left her with severe third-degree burns. Although her body survived, her soul split in two. One half remained with her burned body, while the other half took the form of a baby named Cheryl, who was later adopted by Harry Mason. The cult believed that reuniting both halves of Alyssa's soul would allow the god to be born, so Dahlia uses a spell to lure Harry and Cheryl back to Silent Hill. When Cheryl and Alyssa reunite, Alyssa's psychic powers transform her fears and nightmares into reality, filling the town with monsters to protect herself. Harry defeats Alyssa, and while Cheryl no longer exists, in her final moments, Alyssa reincarnates her own soul into another baby, who later grows up to be Heather Mason. After this, the town of Silent Hill begins drawing in troubled people and turning their inner fears and guilt into monstrous manifestations. So while Silent Hill 1 and 3 put a lot of focus into the cult stuff, Silent Hill 2 was meant to show the aftermath of Alyssa. The series from that point forward was less about Silent Hill being a spooky town and more of a reflection of the protagonist's psyche. Unfortunately, since the dev team disbanded after Silent Hill 4, I just can't help but feel like every game after that just fails to grasp the nuance of what makes the second game work so well. At least not until Silent Hill 2 Remake and F. If we were to break down Silent Hill 2 into its core elements, it would be James is called into Silent Hill to find his dead wife, James encounters spooky monsters, including Pyramid Head, James encounters other people who are just as messed up as him, big plot twist reveals that James actually killed his wife and repressed the memory of it, James has a big final confrontation with his inner demons, and depending on how you played as James and treated him as a character, you get a certain ending. And yeah, throw in a joke ending too, why not? After the original team disbanded, Konami was very liberal with handing out the IP to any Western developer who didn't really have much experience behind AAA games. And those developers tried really hard to recapture that spark that Silent Hill 2 had by regurgitating those main elements. Homecoming's story follows those main elements, and Origins and Downpour tried to be different by having their own versions of Pyramid Head, but man, they were so lame. And I don't really blame the devs for this, by the way. I don't think we'll ever really know what went on, but from what it seems like, I think they were just following directions that were relayed by the corporate overlords over by Konami. I highly recommend checking out Mac McMuscle's videos on the Silent Hill games to get an idea of what a mess these developments were. And they made 2 live-action Silent Hill movies. The first one based on the first game, and the second movie based on the third game. I guess because 1 and 3 are direct sequels of each other, so I mean it's fine. And I know a lot of people defend the first movie and say that it's just a good horror movie even if it's not really accurate to Silent Hill. In my opinion, I don't like it. I'm sorry, I just don't think it's that good. And of course, Silent Hill Revelations was just really terrible, so when I heard that they were making a movie based off of Silent Hill 2 from the same director, I fully intended not to watch this movie because I knew it was going to be bad, but I was sort of hoping that it would just be, at least forgettable. But then I saw people talking about the plot of the movie and how different it is from the game, and I was just in awe. I was genuinely surprised that the movie just did not understand the game at all. So then I finally decided to watch it for myself, and oh my god. So yeah, that's sort of why I'm here. Okay, so I think if I were to go back and forth comparing every single difference between the game and the movie, this video would be like a billion years long. I've come to accept that this movie is not meant to be a standalone adaptation of Silent Hill 2, but more of a sequel to the first movie, which, trust me, you're going to see why that's a problem. So instead, I think it's just better to hastily summarize the film, and then go point by point into why it doesn't really work afterwards. The movie opens with James as a sad alcoholic, clearly not doing great after his breakup with his ex-girlfriend, Mary. He's seen a psychologist and spends his time either getting drunk or getting kicked out of bars. After dragging himself home, he receives a mysterious letter from Mary, calling him back to Silent Hill. I don't think this opening is necessarily bad, but it could be stronger. Giving us more insight into James's grief and how he's actually coping with losing Mary would make it more compelling. Just, the beginning of this movie just feels a bit generic. I feel like I've seen like 100 movies that open up with a sad drunk guy. The original game already had a strong start with him overlooking the town and— oh fuck, sorry, I said I wasn't going to compare it to the original shit. But anyway, off he goes. On the way, he meets a woman named Angela, who warns him that he shouldn't be there, but he of course ignores her. When he arrives, the town is covered in a dense fog and falling ash, and it's basically abandoned, except for this one random homeless guy, I guess. Of course, things immediately start going wrong. He gets attacked by monsters, panics, gets chased by an army of roaches, and flees into the woodside apartments, where he and Mary used to live. Throughout the movie, we get small flashbacks to James and Mary's relationship, including how they first met. Mary was trying to leave Silent Hill, but because James is apparently incapable of driving like a normal person, he almost gets run over by a truck and sends her luggage flying everywhere. What's really funny to me is that the bus that was supposed to take her out of town was literally right there. It hadn't left. It was clearly waiting for her, but instead of waiting 5 seconds for James to repack her bags, she just waves the bus away. And then we get like more flashbacks that seem to heavily imply that Mary is involved with the Order. I can understand that she's afraid to tell James because she has no idea what they'll do to him if he finds out, but like, I don't know, I feel like that's kind of important to talk about when you enter a relationship. So it's like, why? Okay, so if you're gonna wave the bus away that's gonna take you out of town, and James is willing to drive you, pretty much anywhere at this point, then why go back to the town? Back inside the apartments, he meets some weirdo named Eddie, and Laura, a creepy little girl who claims she knows Mary. Pyramid Head shows up and goes boo and chases them around until James escapes. And I mean, along the way, James also comes across some monster spider lady that's supposed to look like Mary, but man, whatever. James then meets a woman named Maria, who looks exactly like Mary but acts differently and... oh, wig. But yeah, she offers to help him get to Brookhaven Hospital where Mary was last seen. We get another flashback of James, as James recalls memories of Mary's involvement in the cult, and it turns out it was founded by her father, and instead of helping her to get her out of the cult, he just leaves, I guess? Eventually, they learn through an audio recording that Mary was poisoned by the cult. At the hospital, the environment transforms again, and Maria gets brutally attacked by monsters, and James is forced to abandon her. He later realizes that Maria isn't real, but basically a manifestation of Mary. Things get even weirder when James ends up in a surreal gallery filled with paintings of Mary. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that James is an artist in this movie, and I don't know, it's giving layers of fear. Pretty spooky. Pyramid Head shows up again, kills Maria, and James briefly sees himself under Pyramid Head's helmet. I guess because under one of James's drunken stupors, he painted a triangle on one of his self-portraits. I don't know. And I mean, I get it. Pyramid Head was originally intended to be James's monster as a representation of his guilt and desire for self-punishment, but they just went about this in the wrong way. James eventually makes it to the Lakeview Hotel where he confronts Laura. She reveals that she, Maria, and Angela aren't real people, but manifestations of different aspects of Mary's personality. And then we get like one of the dumbest fucking reveals I've ever seen in a movie.
Our full name, James.
Oh my god. He also sees Angela attacked by a monstrous figure resembling Mary's father, and him assaulting her, tying back to the cult and her abuse. I have like a million issues with this scene in particular, and I promise I'm going to explain why later. But anyways, James finally remembers the truth. We get one final flashback and... oh, beard. We see that Mary was slowly dying from the cult poison in her, and she begs James to mercy kill her. And he's like, yeah, okay. James confronts a giant moth-like version of Mary, who just straight up looks like Vecnar from Stranger Things. And he's like, babe, I'm sorry. And she's like, yeah, okay. And transforms back into Mary's body. James then places her body in his car, drives to the lake, and drives straight off the pier, committing suicide and mirroring the in-water ending from the game. The movie ends with him reliving the moment where he first met Mary. But instead of driving her back to Silent Hill, they decide to drive somewhere else. And to be fair, I don't think this movie is pulling a literal "it was all a dream" ending. It feels more like a fantasy, or maybe just a version of events James wishes had happened in his final moments. Or maybe I'm giving the movie too much credit. But anyways, the end. I think the only positive that I can give this movie is that sometimes it looks pretty nice. They attempt to recreate the camera angles from the original games, and I think they're able to capture those moments of tension and claustrophobia pretty well. Unfortunately, those instances are few and far between. At multiple other points, the film is difficult to watch, not because of the body horror, but because of some really bizarre cinematography choices. Other times the movie looks dull, there's abrupt cuts, unnecessary shaking, and excessive flashing lights that genuinely feel nauseating. Instead of building any tension or dread, these choices really distract from the story and make the experience feel like an endurance test. I think the movie was able to adapt a couple of the monster designs from the original game pretty well, but some of the new monster designs just straight up look silly. They also made changes to Pyramid Head and the Abstract Daddy, which I'm just particularly annoyed with. The first time I watched this movie was with some friends, and one of them pointed out that every movie adaptation is just sort of a checklist of memorable scenes to recreate, and I honestly think that couldn't be any more accurate. The scenes that they try to recreate are there, and they look visually similar, but they're executed so haphazardly that it honestly just left me really confused. The story has already been altered so much, and without proper context, it's completely devoid of any impact or meaning. I know horror is subjective, and I think if this was any other Hollywood movie, I wouldn't be as annoyed, but there's just no subtlety, no slow burn, no atmosphere.
But Kerbins, why can't you be normal and just let the movie exist on its own terms and appreciate it for what it is?
Because it's still a bad movie.
I mean, yeah, I understand that adaptations can't perfectly replicate their source material, and changes are often necessary in order to make a story work on screen, but the changes here actively undermine the story's impact. Key plot points and character dynamics are altered in such ways that transform an iconic horror game into a shell of what it's meant to be. So yeah, here are three of the biggest changes that, in my opinion, just plain ruined the story. Number 1, the Order as a major presence. There was just no need to add the cult. I don't dislike the Order as much as some other fans do, but I agree it's just plain overused at this point. Silent Hill 2 works precisely because it minimizes the cult. The cult is barely relevant in the original game. In the final third, James visits the Silent Hill Historical Society, where brief passages reference the town's past. The most important detail is that Silent Hill once had executioners who resembled Pyramid Head, wearing triangular bronze hoods. When James and Mary vacationed there before her illness, he saw an image of these executioners. His subconscious later reshaped that image into Pyramid Head. That is essentially the cult's only meaningful connection to the game's narrative. Unlike Silent Hill 1 and 3, where the cult actively drives the plot, Silent Hill 2 removes any organized force pushing the events forward. Each character's mental state shapes how they experience Silent Hill. James mostly sees fog. Angela implies that she sees constant fire, and Laura sees nothing at all because she's an innocent kid. The ambiguity is such a major element of these games that leaves you questioning what you're actually seeing. Everything James encounters is a manifestation of his guilt and desire for self-punishment. Making the Order a central antagonist fundamentally shifts that focus. It removes the nuance and turns the story into one where an outside force orchestrates everything. It stops feeling like a character study and more like a haunted attraction run by someone else. That change weakens the weight of James's actions towards Mary and softens the selfishness at the core of his choices. Number 2. Mary, Maria, Angela, and Laura being merged. I am unbelievably frustrated to merge these 4 into one character. Angela specifically is one of my favorite tragic characters in the series, and I am so exhausted by how often people misunderstand her and why she is the way she is, but I promise I'll talk about that in just a second. Let's start off with Mary. In Silent Hill 2, Mary is rarely seen, but she's the emotional center of the story. Mary appears through fragments, memories, a letter, a videotape, and the final hallway conversation. At first, she seems like an idealized late wife. As the story unfolds, that image becomes more complicated. She was terminally ill for years, in pain and isolated. From her own grief, she started to build resentment and would sometimes lash out at James with verbal abuse. She felt like a burden and hated herself for it. As Mary's doppelganger, Maria serves as her thematic opposite. She resembles Mary but dresses provocatively, flirts with James, and is emotionally dependent on him. Where Mary was exhausted and bitter, Maria was lively and attentive. She represents an idealized fantasy, and James's attraction to Maria reveals his denial and selfish longing for escape. Maria's repeated deaths are essential for the narrative. She dies multiple times, often in front of James, forcing him to relive loss over and over again. It feels like the town is punishing him for trying to break through his repression, but she keeps returning, reinforcing that she isn't real the way Mary was. Choosing Maria ultimately means choosing denial, and facing Mary means confronting the truth. Then we have Angela. She was sexually abused by her father and brother, while her own mother did nothing to stop it. It's strongly implied that Angela killed her father before fleeing. Silent Hill helps to manifest her trauma in the form of the abstract daddy, a monster that symbolizes her abuse, while the fire imagery represents her unrelenting trauma and pain. Angela tends to mentally regress, and at times has the mind of a child. She's withdrawn and self-blaming, having the internalized belief that she deserved what happened to her. And a bit of a personal note, but it actually kind of pisses me off that in the game where we see Angela contemplating suicide with the knife, James is empathetic and tries to talk her down. And even though she has a traumatic response from him approaching her, James is at least able to take the knife away. Meanwhile, in the movie, he just leaves. Yeah, just leave the suicidal alone with the knife. Okay. And I also just hate the abstract daddy in this movie. When you first see it in the game, at first you're really confused as to what you're looking at. It's like a pound of flesh that's fused to a table, plus the fact that you're in a fleshy room with holes and an organic rod sinking in and out of them, that you realize what's going on. Here, in this stupid movie, they decided to paste Mary and her father's face onto it. Oh guys, do you get it? Do you get it? Oh! The ambiguity followed by the realization is what makes the encounter so impactful. Removing all subtlety just ruins this, and it feels really tasteless in my opinion. But anyways, in her final scene, she stands on a staircase engulfed in flames. She simply tells James, "For me, it's always like this," before walking upward, implying her death. Finally, Laura represents innocence. She doesn't see monsters because she doesn't have any eternal torment. Her connection to Mary highlights Mary's warmth and kindness, while her blunt honesty forces James to confront the truth he avoids. She's annoying and obnoxious to James because from her perspective, James didn't care about Mary and would leave her at the hospital for long periods of time. Merging all of these characters into one collapses the core structure of the story. Silent Hill 2 is built on parallel, separate experiences of suffering. Mary represents grief and decay, while Maria represents comfortable delusion. Angela represents abuse and internalized shame independent of James, and Laura represents innocence. Flattening them into one character erases all of their autonomy and reduces the emotional complexity. For a brief honorable mention, I feel like I should talk about Eddie as well. His short appearance in the film is frustrating because, in the game, he functions as sort of a dark foil to James. We get the impression that he's just a normal person who was drawn to Silent Hill, maybe kind of a dopey idiot. However, we find out that Eddie shot his bully in the leg as well as his dog due to years of repressed rage from that bullying. Where James internalizes his guilt, Eddie externalizes it. As we later see Eddie murder someone just for looking at him funny, he attempts to kill James as well, but James has to kill Eddie in self-defense. Eddie represents what happens when insecurity and resentment are allowed to fester unchecked. The original story trusts its characters to carry its weight. James, Mary, Maria, Angela, Laura, and Eddie are not interchangeable. They're all separate people whose trauma manifests differently. Number 3, Mary asking James to kill her. Yeah, this felt like the final nail in the coffin for me. In the original, the emotional impact comes from the fact that James kills Mary out of selfishness, delusion, and a desire to escape reality. This matters because this act is morally indefensible. As we play the game, we feel like we get to know James as a person and what his relationship with Mary was like, and we start to empathize. The town punishes him for something he chose to do and then repressed. If the film reframes her death as the cult poisoning her and has her request to be killed, that softens his culpability and severely weakens the horror of what he's done. And I mean, like, that finding out a character you grew to like doing something so horrible versus a character who did something because he was asked to do so, it hits different, right? And I'm sure like anyone would feel guilt for killing their spouse, but it all just feels so weightless in comparison. Mary becomes more of a passive victim than anything, and James's repression just loses its edge. It's weak. Literally everything about this stupid movie is weak. The horror, the effects, the camera work, the plot, the characters, everything is just so neutered. So why was this made? Who was this for? I think it's a combination of Konami releasing a bunch of new Silent Hill games, including Silent Hill F, and you know that one thing we don't mention, and the upcoming Silent Hill Townfall, on top of the Silent Hill 2 remake in 2024, with Silent Hill 1 remake coming eventually. I think it's safe to say that Konami is really banking and a resurging interest in Silent Hill. And so I think this movie happened in combination of people feeling nostalgic for the first game, and also Silent Hill 2 being the fan favorite. But honestly, this movie just feels like such a slap in the face to Silent Hill fans and everyone who watches it. What made Silent Hill 2 unforgettable wasn't Pyramid Head, the fog, or even the twist. It was the humanity at its core. And once that's gone, no amount of nostalgia can restore that.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching. And if you somehow enjoyed Kerbin's video, feel free to subscribe. I'm sure that would mean a lot.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that this video took so long. But you know what? It was legitimately a lot of fun. I was legitimately caught up with a lot of life stuff. But yeah, I'm really hoping to make more stuff like this in the future. And I know this is corny, but if you like this video, consider like, commenting, and subscribing. It would be kind of cool if it got monetized by the end of the year.
Life stuff. Interesting how your big plans always start right after a 2-year hiatus.
Yeah, okay, whatever.
No need to be defensive. I'm being supportive here. I'm just managing expectations in case life stuff happens again.
Wow. Okay, yeah, anyways, bye!
Yeah, okay. Bye.